because this is progressive pornography. It was not about that. It was about how Nancy Pelosi becomes president before 2020. And I went through.
That's all right.
But people don't know. I wanted to make the point about the 25th Amendment, but people are not aware that if Trump leaves, Pence becomes president. We all get that.
Yep.
But president has to nominate a VP, and 25th Amendment's unique in that both chambers of Congress have to approve, or it remains open. And I don't think most people knew that, so it was really about that. And anyway, let's talk about last night. What's your reaction to Trump's speech?
Well, it is what it is, meaning here he was in, I don't know how long it was, what, like 10 minutes?
A little under 10, I said.
10 minutes. It was striking. Look, all presidents exaggerate or they go on air to make their case for tax cuts. But here he was literally standing in front of the country and manufacturing stories and facts and misstating things, falsely stating things, but with the purpose of creating this manufactured crisis to support the wall. So it was pretty striking. And then you go through the fact checks and you see how point by point there was no veracity what he was saying.
I got to play this clip, Lauren. Here's Jimmy Kimmel last night, who I think maybe did a live show. He did it later, but he talked about the Trump speech. Here's clip number 2.
Much of the debate in this case centered around whether or not it is appropriate to give the president a forum to lie to us on television. For real, this is the concern. So what they did, and I thought this was interesting because they've never done this before, each network decided they would run the speech, but with a disclaimer first.
The following presidential address is a work of fiction. All personalities, incidents, events, locations, and facts were pulled directly from the president's ass. Reality is entirely coincidental.
All right, look, Jimmy Kimmel is skewing the progressives a little bit, but let's be honest, he's informing young people, a younger audience, and reconfirming for those who didn't know, or who did know, Trump is a liar. I mean, there's you can't get around that. This is not, I have Trump supporters call up, oh, what about Obama said you can keep your doctor? That was one lie. This was numerous in one speech. I mean, this is off the charts, the amount of lies. You just wrote a book. Richard Nixon begins in 1974. Has there been a president this bold in just brashly lying to the people like this?
Not all the time. Look, all presidents lie, and every president we covered in this book certainly said a lie, and to different levels. But what's amazing with President Trump, and this speech last night totally captured this, is he will just do ongoing lies and disinformation, and it doesn't bother him. He doesn't try to hide it. He's fine doing that. I don't know how much he thinks through, well, I'm going to spread information and who cares, what's accurate and what's not. But that's different. It's a scale and scope, and it matters. And this kind of legitimates for some people that you can do this. I was talking with someone who's a Trump supporter, and he said, everything the president said is true. And I said, well, it's not. It's just not true.
Right.
And we went through the fact. He says, well, I said, what's your evidence? And he said, I don't know, but it's just not true. And and I think it kind of legitimates that way of thinking. And this is look, he's holding the government hostage essentially for a program that he wants. And now he's doing that based on something that isn't happening at the border. And that is different qualitatively than what we've seen before.
What I find interesting is those on the right who will say things like, okay, I will concede that of the undocumented immigrants in America, 2/3 are visa overstays. Only one come through the border, not even all through the southern border, some through the northern border, but at least it's keeping some people out. And then when I go, but when we made those arguments about things like universal background checks for guns or banning magazine size, they would say, that's not going to stop all murders. But now all of a sudden, the same argument, they're parroting it back to us like, well, it's going to save some lives. So I look forward to those later fights on gun safety issues. Here's what I found remarkable. Shep Smith, not this afternoon, last night on Fox News, in between Trump's speech and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, fact-checked Trump live to the Fox News audience unchallenged. Let's play clip number 3.
He made a number of claims there, speaking specifically about murder rates among those who are undocumented immigrants. The government statistics show that there is less violent crime by the undocumented immigrant population than by the general population. He called it a crisis of the heart and soul. He talked about drug crossings over the border, but government statistics show much of the heroin actually comes not over the unguarded border, but through ports of call. He talked about undocumented crossings over the past the past months. In fact, the number of undocumented crossings over the southern border has been steadily down over the last 10 years, and the government reports that there is more outward traffic than inward traffic. As for the trade deal he mentioned with Mexico, which he said would pay for the wall, that trade deal is not yet complete. And the president said that law enforcement professionals have requested the $5.7 billion. It's he who requested it, and it's he who said he would own the shutdown.
58 seconds. He fact-checked 4 or 5. And that's
Right.
on prime time. That's not today and the afternoon. It was remarkable. They had Shep Smith and Chris Wallace was there. And Sunday, Chris Wallace decimated Sarah Huckabee, as I call her, Sanders, who lied about, she repeated the lie, 4,000 terrorists have come through. I won't play that clip again. Chris Wallace so devastated her. I think that's the only reason Trump didn't bring it up last night.
Yeah.
Because it became laughable.
Well, look, I think if you are on Fox, you're a conservative, but you can see the president actually undermines your cause. In the short term, this might work at some level for Trump supporters, for Fox viewers. But even if you're a very hawkish border control person, this is the president just making stuff up. And so, you know, I think you're going to get some pushback, just as you're getting a little pushback from Republicans on the Hill. It's not about principle. It's in part about partisanship and realizing that the president might, in the long run, not be in the best interest for conservatives or the GOP.
What do you think of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who both they repeated one thing, that Democrats want border security. We just disagree with Donald Trump how to get border security. And I think, let's play Chuck Schumer. This is like a 30-second clip, sort of summing that up. Clip number 6.
No president should pound the table and demand he gets his way, or else the government shuts down, hurting millions of Americans who are treated as leverage. Tonight, and throughout this debate and throughout his presidency, President Trump has appealed to fear, not facts, division, not unity. Make no mistake, Democrats and the president both want stronger border security. However, we sharply disagree with the president about the most effective way to do it.
That kind of sums it up in a very good faith kind of way. And even Trump on Friday in the Rose Garden said Democrats want border security, which freaked out some on Fox News because they wanted to make this false argument that Trump wants a wall and Democrats want open borders. Well, Trump destroyed that. That's gone. He even said, but he thinks only a wall can work. And we're saying, and I read numerous experts earlier in other ways to spend the money to make our border secure. But do you think this approach by Democrats saying, look, we want border security in the long run is a really good strategy?
As part, look, it's part of a strategy. If all they want to do is try to outflank him and say, well, we want strong border security, then they're fighting on his terms.
True.
And I don't know how much that will excite the supporters. And this could be a long fight. It is important to note that. I mean, no one's disputing border security. There's different levels of it, different kinds of it. And so that's a false argument. I think the other two arguments are really important, though. Most important, the Democrats have to keep hammering home that the president is holding the government hostage for a program. Imagine if in 2009, President Obama said, I'm not going to agree to fund the government until you pass a health care program. Republicans would be up in arms. Many Democrats would, too, if that was the method. He never did that. He defended an existing program when it was trying to be cut. And so they need to keep hammering home. And they need to also just hammer home on the way he conducts his business. I think there's a lot of opposition to his leadership style.
Trump's? I have to think deep down, honestly. I don't even think deep down. The establishment Republicans in Washington will be happy when he's gone.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. Those are more in sync with him, perhaps, but I think even a Lindsey Graham will say things like, woo, thank God that guy's gone. Like, you're going to hear a whole bunch of comments, or the only reason they might not do them publicly is because they have to still deal with the Trump base that's there in their state. But I think they would all be so much happier if Mike Pence was their president right now.
But until then, this is what is happening. And I think what the government shutdown is really showing is the real world consequences of the kind of governance that he's adopted. This is a crisis. The crisis isn't on the border. The crisis is in Washington. We have right now a government that's not functioning. Now people aren't getting paychecks. Government services are not being delivered. And it's unclear to me what the rules of the game are because he doesn't follow the rules of the game President Trump. His incentives are not like every other politician. So we don't know how this ends. And that is a frightening moment to be in if you follow American politics and live in this country.
And what's interesting today, and this is just based on reporting, so we take it with a grain of salt, but Trump goes in the meeting with Democratic leaders, maybe handed out candy, Mike Pence is saying, but Trump storms out because they said, we're not giving the wall. And it almost seemed like Trump thought he'd make this speech, and they're like, well, I got to give in. That speech was really good. Like, nothing had changed from yesterday to today. The facts have not changed. Nothing anyone said last night, I imagine, moved anybody. I think most people, if you think there's a crisis at the border, there's nothing I can say to change it. If you don't think there's a crisis, nothing Trump said last night will change that either. I think many are scratching their heads going, why are we shutting the government down over this? Why aren't you just discussing this like any other political issue? Why would you shut the government down over one little issue?
Right.
And that's not good politics. Not for the country. And now he might declare an emergency. The rumor now is he might go back to that tactic. So then you open the government and I says declares an emergency and lets it go through the court system. I can't imagine Republicans are happy at that precedent because Democratic president could do it next.
Look, there's two ways this ends. One is that Senate Republicans and enough House Republicans say we can't afford to do this, and they vote to fund the government with numbers that can override the president. They can end this tonight if they want.
Right.
That's the reality. So they are holding out as much as the president. And the other is what you just said. He says, fine, let's do the budget. He goes to emergency power, reuses money that's in the budget already to start building a wall. He will be challenged in the courts. He will be challenged by Congress, which can try to revoke that emergency power. And that might be what he wants most because he doesn't lose and he just pushes the fight to the next stage, which is exactly what he likes. It says more fight and more Trump news.
And it's more about Trump. What I find interesting, and this is purely anecdotal for everyone, so I could be wrong, and if Trump supporters are listening, they'll call in and make it clear I'm wrong. When I talk about gun issues, I'm overwhelmed by people on the right calling, fired up and passionate about it. There are a few other issues which we'll talk about that do this. On the wall, I don't see that. I don't get on Twitter. I see the typical talking point like, you want open borders. I'm like, no, we don't want open borders. We want security. Let's not waste our money on things that don't work. And you can get to a common ground place pretty quickly if someone is in good faith. And others, I don't see the overwhelming passion. And I think he's looking at poll numbers, or Ann Coulter said it and Rush Limbaugh, and it had misled Trump on some level to think that this is a make or break issue for his base. I don't think this is even close to the make or break issue for his base.
It's a classic example of this president kind of taking a stand on something that probably hurts him as much as anyone else. He constantly shoots himself in the foot on these guys. And I think you're absolutely right. I think if he had just focused on ratcheting up border security and deportation, those probably have a lot of resonance in right-wing electoral base. The wall is at some level just a silly proposition. And I think there's enough Republicans, base Republicans, who say we're really going to spend over $5 billion on a wall.
Part one of the wall. It's 25 to 30 billion without even eminent domain and litigation costs and that. And look, here Trump could have easily, if he was a confident, secure person, he could have declared victory, because in the bill, the Senate bill that passed and then the House passed it, in it allocated $1.3 billion for new fencing in the Rio Grande Valley, $360 million for border secure technology, $7 million to hire over 320 more Customs and Border agents, $224 million for non-intrusive inspection equipment, and $7 billion for U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. This is because of Trump pushing hard on this issue. He could have, in good faith, said, look what I did. I might not go to the wall yet, but look how much I've gotten Democrats to give in on an issue they weren't going to give on before. And he could have. And he misleads Americans, but he was misled on some level, I think, by honestly the Ann Coulters and the Hannitys and many other on Fox News. That it was a loop cut together. Like, this is the end of his presidency. This is his read my lips moment. Yeah. I think he was horribly misled. I don't think the base cares that much, but they want border security, wall or no wall. The wall was, it was a game, a thing at the rally to say, and who's going to pay for it? Mexico. He'll still do that at rallies. It doesn't even matter.
Right.
They don't care. It's a game. It's fun. It's communion for them. Who's going to pay for it? Mexico. So And he's given them so much else. I mean, think about it. He's defended white supremacists.
Yep.
He has attacked Dr. Christine Ford. He's demonized Mexicans,
Right.
wanted to ban Muslims, ban transgender Americans from the military. What more do you want, Trump supporters? He's given you blood. He's given you all the sexism, bigotry, and racism you could have only dreamed of in 4chan chat rooms come to life now in the White House. All right. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll take a call or two, put him in the conversation here, 866-997-4748. I'm talking to Julian Zelizer, professor from Princeton. You see him on CNN all the time doing a great job. Look, it's time the media start calling out Trump's false statements for what they are. Lies. Trump's a liar. And by the looks of it, he's lying every day and twice on Sundays.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
This is the Dean Obeidallah Show, exclusively on Sirius.
In a few minutes from now, if you like politics, it's a great book. Just in time for what holiday's coming up? Valentine's Day. If you're looking for a Valentine's Day gift for a loved one who really likes politics, Fault Lines is your book. Here, let's say here's someone who lives by the border. Here's John from Texas. John, how are you?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can, John. How are you? Can you hear me?
It's literally like 2 hours from San Antonio, and from them, it's like 30 minutes. There's like a highway you can take. Literally goes to an access point to the border.
Okay.
I just want everyone to know there's no war going on down here in Texas, you know, especially the people in the northern states. There's no – I'm literally here waiting to pick up my wife on over here by the Alamo. There's no
invasion force taking over your car?
Here. You know, there's just none of this.
John, can you see the invasion force from where you're sitting? Can you see them from your door?
No,
there's no invasion force,
I don't see one. I don't. You know, it's just and people get this concept, especially Trump supporters that who don't even live on a border state like I do.
Well, I live in a border state, but it's New York and New Jersey.
There's none of that down here. We're just people trying to live our lives, and there's no crisis. Yes, did some kids die? That's definitely something that we should investigate and look at under his own administration.
Trump didn't even talk about that last night, about 2 children dying. Obviously, he would not. Julian, what do you make of John offering actually evidence from the border? Will that move anyone on Trump's side?
It won't, but it's important to hear. And that's a personal account that fits all the fact checks and overwhelming amount of data we see about what's going on, just how crossings take place, the number that are taking place. The fact this isn't the source of illegal crossings, the majority of it. But it is important to hear someone who's there, because I think, again, this is a televised president, so to speak, and he's manufactured an image. And so to hear people on the ground matters, to confirm the numbers that just don't square with what the president is saying and what his supporters insist is happening. This is not a national security crisis. And that's what he's about to legitimate his emergency power on.
John, are you still there, or were you taken by the invading force? Did they get you? You're right.
Oh, no.
You're okay. Thank God. Whoa, because you never know, John, the way Trump paints it, it's apocalyptic, and they're coming over the border in masses, and they've got a giant from Game of Thrones with them and stuff.
And unfortunately, I have some. My folks love to watch Fox News, so I get a glimpse of what they're showing, and literally, it's like every day they show people climbing over the border, and they make it seem again like there's this unreality of the place we actually live in, that they think that, you know, they just get this concept of what they think is here when that's really not the case. You know,
how dare you, your fake news, call in my show and try to explain things.
It's not a war.
Well, John, you know, you got to keep your fake news out of this place, because God forbid a Trump supporter hears it and their head hurts and they go, oh my God, John from Texas said there's no border. John, I appreciate your call, my friend, and telling us what's going down there. And it's so important that people hear their truth and not. Trump wants to mislead you. Don't let him bring you to the dark side. The truth will set you free. So thanks for the call, John. I appreciate it, my friend.
It's also,
Bye-bye.
I mean, it's bad policy. There's a lot on the speech from last night about how do these drugs come in, like heroin, and they actually come in through the legal points of entry. And so he's actually calling for redirecting money in the wrong direction if this is a problem that really concerns you. And so it's even for a hawk, whether it's on drugs or immigration, he's redirecting money in the wrong way. It's not simply directing it toward a crisis.
I read that portion because I refuse to play Trump to people, because I think all Trump speeches come with a warning that listening to this will make you dumber. But he talked even not just about heroin, but fentanyl in there. And that's coming from China. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It doesn't matter. He just throws it. And then he'll talk about the opioid crisis, which is a crisis, which 200 Americans are going to die today. Over 70,000 died. I mentioned that statistic in the same context he did earlier in the show, my show, before his speech, saying more Americans died in 2017 from drug overdoses than in the entire Vietnam War. That's absolutely true. That's a national emergency.
Yep.
This war will not stop that national emergency. Drug treatment programs might play a big role in that. And cracking down on China and the fentanyl, sending it to our country. And to be fair, Trump has tried to with China. He's actually talked about that issue. No results yet, but at least he's addressing it. So let's talk about right now in the approval ratings for Donald Trump. He has slid during this shutdown to now actually it's statistically significant. I mean, it's not a huge drop, but he's down to using 538 as the standard. He was around 43% before the shutdown, now around 41% on the almost breaking to 40 under 41%, likely in April of last year. So this is chipping away at his support level. At what point do you think he doesn't care because he thinks he's running in 2 years, so this doesn't matter?
He either thinks that or he believes the numbers are cooked and they're not accurate. Either way, it doesn't totally bother him. I think he still expects come 2020, if he's running again, most Republicans are going to vote for him. They're not going to vote for it. Start to, between now and the campaign, reconsider their support. Does it lead to primary fights against him from within his own party? That's where the approval numbers matter more. He is not really invested, I think, in making political decisions on that.
Well, I found it interesting. Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, came out, and she has a big chunk of almost 15,000 federal employees work there, one of the highest states. Came out point blank, told the Alaskan press, told the national press, but the Alaskan press, I looked at it, picked it right up. Don't hold our workers hostage. The list goes on. You have Cory Gardner in Colorado, who's up for re-election, concern. Susan Collins in Maine already said we shouldn't be shutting down the government. Tom Tillis in North Carolina expressing concern. And now even John Cornyn, the second or third ranking highest senator from Texas, up for re-election, saying we should not be closing the government down over this issue. And Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia. So you have enough now to get below a majority. I mean, they could easily vote. Let me put it this way. You can easily vote in that Senate to fund the government to open.
Yeah.
The question is if Trump, people brought this up earlier, what if Trump, they do that, which would be stunning for McConnell to call a vote, but say they did that and Trump vetoed it. What do you think would happen if there's actually an override?
Oh my gosh! If there's
Trump
an
goes
override,
crazy, right?
He would be livid if his party did that. I could imagine him not vetoing it if they send it to him and giving up at that point.
Right, that's what I think.
That's
I think
when
Mitch McConnell would tell him,
"Say, oh, fine, I'll do it another way." I'm not sure he'd be in for that fight, frankly. He doesn't like the legislative process. He doesn't like dealing with Congress. So at some level, most of them have been in enough to know the longer this goes on, the more government shutdown means something to a broader range of the public in their states and districts, and that's when it becomes a problem for them. It's still a partial shutdown, so it's been somewhat abstract, but now it's hitting. Paychecks are not going out now. Government services are starting to bite. So many of them are savvy enough, even right-wing red state Republicans, to know this can affect them, and that is something. That's the line for them that Trump can't cross.
What I'm really intrigued by, in 2006, George Bush gets midterm. Trump declares victory. I got all the Senate seats. My question is, did Obama and Bush, after making those statements about a thumping and a shellacking and humbling, actually change in terms of policy at all? Or do they just acknowledge they got beat and just continue on the same path? Because that's what people keep asking about Trump. Why is he not? Hasn't he learned anything from the midterms? I mean, this immigration was the issue he ran on, and Democrats got a record victory, frankly. So from history, does it show us that it was more, was it lip service or was there actually actions?
No, it's more. I mean, Clinton, Bush, this is when you see the surge, which is not what liberals wanted, but it is a reconfiguration of policy in Iraq toward a different strategy positions because he sees the math. And Obama doesn't have a lot of legislative action post 2010. Most of it's executive,
right,
on the climate, on immigration. So the era of the ACA, of the stimulus, that is over. So presidents usually do react beyond lip service.
Or is it because they have no choice because Congress has changed composition? So you can't, like poor Obama only had 2 years of Democrats having the House and the Senate, and then he loses the House in 2010. They didn't regain it till just this January when we got it finally, and then loses the Senate a few years later. But he lost with one chamber. You're lame duck on policy unless you can get the other side to come along.
But you could say that with Trump right now. He doesn't have the numbers for the wall. And yet that hasn't stopped him. So there is a difference in some ways in how he thinks about dealing with their blues.
Oh, all right. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll try to take some calls. I'm just intrigued by some conservatives calling. I can see in the notes what they want to say. It just sucks me in. It's like, why? We've got CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News on. And why do I always watch Fox News in the commercial break? Because I am stunned by what's going on in that channel. I am like a moth to a flame. I'm like, don't. And I got to fly over there. And then my wings are on fire and I'm on the ground. So now, let's take a break. Come right back with more of Dean Obeidallah Show and our friend Julian Zelizer.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Whoever's the next president, we should call them the 45th president of the United States. And this will go down as a dark time in America that we'll never do again.
Sirius X. to the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress.
And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here with our friend Julian Zelizer. Quick thing though, Julian, I don't know, you work a long day, you write, you go on CNN, you come home, you're hungry. What are you going to do? Do you want to cook something now? You live in New York, you might order. HelloFresh.com makes everything simple. You're going to know what's in the food because you're going to cook it yourself. And it could not be easier. You open the box they send you. Inside every single ingredient you need from, say it's meat dish, the chicken's there, the potatoes, the vegetables, the spices. You cook it everything less than 30 minutes with a simple recipe guide. They have fabulous traditional menu to their gourmet menu. So it might be things like meatloaf and mashed potatoes to spice steak and glazed salmon in delicious ways that start at $6.99 a serving. And they deliver it all right to your doorstep. Open the box, everything is waiting for you. You don't have to shop. There's no missing ingredients when you're cooking. Anyone can cook their recipes. And right now, get $80 off your first order. That's right, $80 off. If you go to HelloFresh.com/Dean and enter code DEAN80 for $80 off. Again, that's HELLO fresh.com/Dean. Enter DEAN80. You're going to love it. It's good for you. You get single portions or for your whole family. And the food is really great. I've cooked it many times myself. Julian, you should try it. You should have a HelloFresh party at your thing. So let's take a quick call here. Just come on, Julian. You're game for this?
Absolutely.
Here's Owen from Chicago who's upset about undocumented immigrants. Owen, why are you upset?
I wouldn't say upset about undocumented immigrants. I just like to start with saying, like, I'm totally for legal immigration.
Good.
But I think because at least I'm pretty sure 30% of the border is not secured, that allows for more illegal immigrants to get in. That's where I think the wall would come in handy. The wall wouldn't just stop immigration completely at the southern border. It would just be containing it and, like, allowing for more doors to say for legal immigrants to come in and, like, be documented and not be taken away from taxpayers' money.
So the taxpayer money you're talking about they're losing is actually on what? From Owen? From prosecuting people? Where is the taxpayer money spent? I have no problem with that. I'm just trying to figure it out.
If an illegal immigrant comes into the United States and starts working and all that money gets untaxed, all that taxes that they're not paying goes to the legal citizens that have well-working jobs and trying to support their families.
Not sure about that, but in any event, Owen, here's the truth. But the thing is, here's the deal. It's about what's an efficient use of our tax dollars, because Mexico's not paying for it. That's off the table. Trump failed at that. So the question is, how do we spend $25 to $30 billion, or is that the right choice for the wall to do that? Will it reduce some undocumented immigrants? I have no doubt if you build an entire wall, it will reduce it. The question is, what's more effective for our tax dollars and what's efficient? Expert after expert has said building a wall is not the most efficient in terms of effectiveness, nor in terms of cost efficiency. We all want border security, Owen, left and right. What I want to do is I'm going to use my tax dollars and your tax dollars, Owen, that you're concerned about, that you're paying into the system. It should be efficient. So expert after expert, I read about it earlier in the show, they do things with fencing, virtual fencing, sensors. There are countless ways to make the border more secure that don't cost $30 billion and don't take a lot of people's property. I mean, you're talking about a 2,000-mile border. And as Julian knows, they have to take eminent domain, take Americans' properties, and they have no choice. You can fight it, but you're going to lose. The government wants your property. You get compensated. That's horribly unfair. If it's not the last resort, the only way you should be able to take their properties if it's the only way to do something. So, Julian, any reaction?
No, I think, look, it's a debate. It's not much of a debate. Most people are in favor of border security.
Right.
There's a debate about how best to do it. There is a pretty strong consensus that what the country has done has actually been effective. Illegal immigration at the border has gone down steadily over a decade now to very small numbers. And so there's few people who are saying that this wall is going to have any significant effect. And that's what I keep searching for.
Right.
People who are credible. And there's just not a lot of
Trump's
support.
not credible?
No. And so then it's a monument.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Right, exactly. And Owen, and this is undisputed, 2/3 of the undocumented immigrants in America are through visa overstays. 1/3 are from border crossings, not all from the southern border, some from the northern border as well, but primarily from the southern border, to be fair. But if 2/3 are coming from one place, why are we not focusing on the biggest source of undocumented immigrants? Why are we focusing on the smaller source? I don't get that.
Well, there's about 12.5 million illegal immigrants in the United States at this time, and on federal, state, and local levels, taxpayers are giving about $134 billion, I think, to cover for those illegal immigrants.
I'm not sure how they're covering for them. It's a debatable, it's a sort of a Trumpian thing. But I just said, Owen, seriously, 2/3 of the undocumented immigrants who come to our country come here through overstays, meaning they come in legally and they get a 6-month visa to stay in America and they just stay here. Or they come in for a shorter visa and they just overstay. Why don't we have more dealing with where the biggest source of undocumented immigrants are coming from, if you're concerned about that, than where the lesser one is coming from? I don't understand why it's not. Trump won't even talk about the biggest source of undocumented immigrants. He won't even address it. I don't get that.
Right. Nor will he talk about a path to citizenship for people who are here, millions and millions of people, which could actually alleviate some of the problems that the caller is discussing and integrate them into the economy. They are here already. They're living here. They have families here. The president isn't interested in it. This is not what the fight's about. This is a rational discussion about an irrational proposal. And I think it's important to highlight that, not to insult the president, but that the wall has nothing to do with diminishing the tax burden of American taxpayers or really fundamentally changing the inflow of illegal immigration. This is a monument about where you stand on immigration. Right. And it's a campaign half promise because taxpayers are now going to pay for it, not Mexico. And he can say whatever he wants. It's not a campaign promise. It's actually, it's like Bush saying, read my lip, no new taxes. This is his version of it. Read my lips. I guess
I'm going to build a wall,
we're paying
and
for
Mexico's
it.
not going to pay for it. All right, Owen, good talking to you, my friend. So let's talk about, we have one more break? All right, why don't we take our last break so we can come back and talk about your book, Fault Lines, which is it's a great book. It's an important book to talk about. And, it's so interesting, this other discussion we're having here, where you're fighting against misinformation and spewed by the person in the White House and nonstop font of misinformation. And I really think that it's truly, and Trump supporters are not going to agree with me, but I think it's disrespectful to you that Donald Trump keeps lying to you and that you repeat those lies because you think it's the president, you can count on that person. Well, you can't. And he is hurting you and this country by doing that. If he was making an honest argument, we're just debating real facts. That's different. We can have this real good policy discussion. We're not. We're fact-checking instead of having policy discussions because it's serial liars. Let's take a break, come right back with our friend Julian Zelizer right here.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here with our friend Julian Zelizer, CNN contributor, Princeton University professor, author of numerous books, including a brand new one with Kevin Cruz, Fault Lines, A History of the United States since 1974. So, Julian, tell us a little bit about the book.
Look, it's a history of this country, the period you never study in high school, starting when Richard Nixon steps down as president, and it goes right to year one of Trump. And it looks at how we became so divided, why our politics are so divisive, why our economy is so split between the rich and the poor, and why our culture is so deeply divided on all kinds of issues like sexuality and race, and how this all came to be. It's not a product of President Trump. It's not a product of even the last few years. This has been cooking since the 1970s.
Why do you think it began in the 1974? Why did you begin there?
Well, it's when Nixon steps down. It's hard to remember now what a trauma that was for this country. He epitomized everything that had gone wrong with the great things about the country. And Vietnam had shattered our confidence in the country. The collapse of the economy by the early 70s had done the same. And finally, a president saying in the middle of his second term, under investigation, I'm out, I'm flying away. That's a big moment. So he thought it was a perfect way to just start the story of what comes after.
So was there polarization widespread in America politically before 74? I don't mean distantly. I mean within the few years before.
No,
74.
I mean from the 30s to the 70s, you don't have the same kind. The parties are divided internally. You have Southern Democrats, Northern Democrats who are liberal. Republicans are the same. The media isn't partisan. It isn't as fractured as it's going to be in the period that we write about. So there's more sources that unify the country. Even the economy, the union-based economy, held different parts of this country together in a way that wouldn't happen. So the period we're in is distinct because of how far different people and institutions moved apart.
I had on the show Monday comedian and philosopher king Colin Quinn, who in his new one-man show actually says, and he told me here, he believes we're heading to a civil war. And he's not kidding. He truly believes in his heart. I happen to disagree.
Yeah.
I think we're in a cold civil war of cultural issues. I think few would, and he actually agreed in a way that few would give up a good lifestyle to actually fight someone they disagree with politically and actually throw their life away and go to prison for the rest of their life type of thing. But what do you think about the idea? What would it take to go the next step to actually be?
Yeah, I don't know. I love Colin Quinn and he's hilarious, but I'm not sure we're literally going to a hot civil war. And in part because we've been playing out these divisions so much and we haven't gone that far at this point. But I see where he's coming from. I mean, he is someone who grew up in the period we wrote about. He's literally, this is his lifetime, and that's part of what we're trying to do. So by the time you're his age or our age, that is very much how you can feel like you're very distant from other people in this country. You're living a different economic and cultural and political experience where there is absolutely no common ground. And the media is a perfect example of how you see this fragmentation every day.
Does Fox News play a role in your book by any chance?
Big part. A big part of our story. It's not about politics. It's about the media. And, you know, we start the story in early 70s. You still have 3 networks dominate television. A handful of city papers shape the news. But over time, things change. We have about the advent of CNN and the 24-hour news cycle. We have about in the 1990s, where does this partisan media come from? And Fox goes on the air in 96, and they're totally willing to do something that 2 decades earlier would have been out of bounds. Just present the news from a very particular political perspective. And all that then explodes even further, we write about with the internet and social media in the early 2000s.
Did the end of the fairness doctrine?
Big part of our story.
It is, because I've had numerous callers call up and say, in their view, that's where they think that it changed things. How did the fairness doctrine have an impact on what we see on television?
It's a doctrine that the FCC had in place since 1949. If a radio station or TV show put on a point of view, you had to give equal time to the other, or you could be sued in court. 1987, Reagan says, that's not a fair regulation. Let's get rid of it. He says it hurts conservatives who don't have access to big networks and big newspapers, and it's gone. They let it go by the wayside. Democrats fail to protect it. And right after that, we found between the late 80s and the early 90s, before Fox, you have a massive proliferation of conservative talk radio. That's when it happens. And then Fox comes on, and it creates a legal and policy landscape where you can give news this way. And even then, it wasn't clear in the mid-90s where this was going to go.
Right.
I mean, you turn on Fox today, they've perfected the art in a way Ailes couldn't have imagined, Roger Ailes, in 96. But the fairness doctrine is one of these boring technical policies that has a huge impact when it's gone.
So if you were to enact a new fairness doctrine now, say Democrats get control of the Senate and the House, they have over 60 Senate seats. If they were to enact that, how would that impact cable news? Would it, because it was only networks then?
Yeah.
Or?
It was networks and radio. And the reason the government could do it was because stations needed to get the right to have access to the airwaves. It wouldn't work anymore.
Right.
I mean, we are in an age, and we write about this, where the technology has changed how we produce news and shows, and everyone can do it in some ways. And so I don't think a fairness doctrine could actually be reinstated. The government can't control information that's not even produced in this country often, even though you're watching it here.
Right. I mean, Trump was produced in Russia. So you have that going on right there. What do you, in your book, is there a prescription on how we can unite more as Americans? You tried to bring us together?
Not really. We have a little ending.
It's just a waste of time.
Right.
I'm not kidding. It's just.
We have an ending just talking about always the possibility that the kind of grassroots ferment you've seen in the last few years might lead to something better. But the point of our book is it's not likely. And that's when you're a historian and you give a 4-decade, 5-decade history of how this came to be. The end point isn't, well, maybe if we have a new president, it will be that much better. The point is the opposite. President Trump is the culmination, a product of all of these decades of fighting.
No, there are fellow progressives who I like. You're not you're a centrist, but friends of mine who you know who wrote books, and they become like these kumbaya books. I'm like, I like, sounds great, but it's not the world we live in.
Nope.
It's not, there's no easy prescription to unite us. It's going to be a lot of work. I don't know if it'll ever be. Maybe as long as we don't have a civil war, a real one. So we disagree. We all live our lives. And at the end of the day, hopefully we remember we're all fellow Americans. I'm not sure. Julian, thanks very much. Check out his brand new book. It's just out, Fault Lines, A History of the United States since 1974. Julian, thanks for coming in studio and spending an hour with us. I really appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, we'll take a break. When we come back, a brand new segment we're trying out. Stick around. You'll hear all about it.